Thank you all for tuning in to this Great Southeast Pollinator Census update. So I assume if you're here, you want to learn a little bit more about the Great Southeast Pollinator Census and maybe learn how to do it and see if this is something that you are for. My name is Lisa Klein, and I am with the Agriculture and Natural Resources team here at UJ Extension in Gwinnett. And I teach the In the Garden webinar series. So we have three new, mostly new, sometimes I do review material, webinars a month, one lunch and learn, two in the evening, like this one. And sometimes it's interesting stuff. I go down the rabbit hole of weird things, and sometimes it's horticultural stuff. Other times it's nuisance wildlife. You're never going to not attend and not learn something. So I appreciate you being here. And this is recorded. So if you have questions, it'll be up on the Metro Master Gardener YouTube channel. You can always go back and take a look there if you're interested. And then at the end, I'll answer any questions that you guys want to put in the chat box. So the Great Southeast Pollinator Census has been around now for, oh golly, like 6 years, I think. It started out as the Great Georgia Pollinator Census and has grown. And now we have, goodness, I think it's like 5 or 6 states that are doing it, all in the Southeast, hence the Southeast part of the Great Southeast Pollinator Census. But the methodology has remained the same and the data continues to increase. So we have a really good way of kind of keeping tabs on our pollinator population. So let's go ahead and start. We're going to learn a little bit about where this started, why we do it, and then about midway through, we'll kind of go over the different categories of insects that we'll be looking at. We'll have a little quiz, and feel free to put your answers in the chat box if you want. I'll take a look there, and then talk a little bit more about any opportunities to participate if you would like to. And yeah, so let's get started. All right, so we all know that pollinators are very, very important to our lives because they produce 70, or the pollination part of this contributes to the outputs of about 75% of global plants. So pollinators are super important. Now, not all of them are insects. There are animals that are pollinators as well. We're not going to address the hummingbirds or the bats. That contribute to that and some other animals. But we are going to talk about the insects because that's what, we're kind of cataloging here. It needs to be very relevant to the Southeast, and hopefully this will mushroom and move into maybe the different other regions of the country. But for now, it's the Southeast. So we all know pollination is the transfer of pollen from the male parts of the flower to the female parts. Sometimes it's a different flower, sometimes it's the same tree or bush or whatever. But you can see down at the bottom based on the statistics that I've pulled. And I'm sorry I don't have anything more recent. It's sometimes we get lucky and they do reports and catalog these numbers, and sometimes they don't, and they haven't over the last couple years. But in 2014, the annual value of pollination in Georgia was over 360 million. And in 2021, 635 million. That's probably the most recent number that we have for Georgia. That's a lot. I mean, it kind of doubled in that amount of time. Worldwide and adjusted, we have 2020 numbers, which again, that's like 6 years ago, but that's the most recent that we have. Between 267-ish and 657 billion worldwide. That's a lot. So the Georgia has a rather robust agricultural economy, not so much here in Gwinnett where I'm located. There are some, I would call them micro farms and other private industries that do contribute to the agricultural numbers, but by and far, most of that is either going to be in the northern part of the state in orchards, or it's going to be down in the southern part of the state with your center pivot agriculture, blueberries, pecans, however you want to say that. We're actually starting some olives, believe it or not. We're looking at citrus industry. We've got some new frontiers in the citrus greening saga, which took out most of Florida's citrus crops. They're actually making some headway in getting rid of it, figuring out how to use rootstock and some other things. So the citrus industry will likely start coming back. Florida's got a lot of growth involved. They've got now houses where these farms used to be. So we may see some of that citrus push into the Gulf states like Georgia and Alabama, also maybe into Mississippi, so on and so forth. So we kind of think of bees, honeybees, when we think of pollinators. And honeybees are one of the most prolific pollinators. They're very efficient and they make yummy honey, which is why we like them so much. But they do a very fantastic job of flitting from flower to flower very quickly. Um, but we want to make a point of saying that all pollinators are very important. We have tons of solitary bees, we have flies, we have wasps and moths, beetles. Butterflies, I mean, some people think about butterflies, but all those others are in that pollinator category as well. And a lot of people don't realize it, but different plants will attract different pollinators. I go down that rabbit hole in quite a few of my webinars, and we talk about the different ways that you can attract different types of pollinators. So the EPA has asked states to produce this customized plan. So that's what we're kind of focusing on here. That's why the Great Southeast Pollinator Census has come to be. So we needed a really good way to track quantitatively pollinators that are in the southeastern states. There was no large scale plan for that. So a bunch of different organizations, including UGA, got together and brainstormed the, the pollinator census. Um, so this is all originally it started, it was all the stakeholders, people who had hives, university level, um, Department of Agriculture, Environmental Protection Division, anything that had to do with pollinators and or impacted pollinators, and they were involved somehow. So this, you can see the little booklet on the right. This is actually the booklet that goes into the protecting Georgia's pollinators, in which this was the basis for the pollinator census. I'll go over basically the synopsis of what was in there so that we can learn a little bit about that. But the Georgia's Pollinator Protection Plan was between the Department of Entomology and the Department of Ag. So those were the two main players in creating this. But of course, there's other smaller players as well. And now we're all involved. So some things that we can do as citizen scientists or stewards of the environment. So in extension, we really espouse taking care of the environment. I mean, we're okay if you want to use the occasional pesticides, but we would really prefer for you to use integrated pest management in dealing with your day-to-day life of your landscape, gardening, all the things, because that helps leave room for pollinators and other insects and animals that live out there. There's always a solution, and there's better ways to do it than like the most, I guess, either unethical or other ways that might eliminate them, if you want to say that. So when we talk about helping and protecting pollinators and other insects that do well for our environment, that means that one, we're going to probably leave some significant areas of our property undisturbed. Why? Because soil nesting bees. So soil nesting bees, and you can see in that little inset photo there, it looks like a bunch of fire ant mounds, but fire ants don't produce mounds that close to one another. Those are actually ground nesting bees. So you're going to see maybe in a sunny area of a Bermuda lawn or a warm season grass like zoysia or something like that. You might see these little hills of soil pop up in early midish spring. So March, early April, probably more March. Um, they're there for about 3 weeks and then they're gone. And those are ground nesting bees. So we want to encourage folks, don't treat those when you see them. They are not fire ant mounds. They're actually ground nesting bees. Fire ant mounds are pretty distinctive. They generally are a lot bigger and broader. What you're seeing here may only be a couple inches across, not any more than probably 3/4 of an inch tall, right? And the consistency of the soil is different because with the ants, they're much smaller and they're bringing those granules of soil up and making a hill or a mound, whereas these little bees are basically just excavating a burrow, just big enough that they can put their eggs in their larvae and then, they're moving on and doing their own thing. So, what can you do to help? Well, you can provide nest building materials. So, if you have a place where maybe you don't have soil, and you have ground that's kind of bare and open, that's a good thing. You can also have some waxy leaved plants. I know a lot of us probably have English ivy hanging around. That actually is something that they can use. But anyway, ground nesting bees, they're pollinators also, so you can definitely help them. All right, consider creating a pollinating landscape space in your yard. Not all of us, I guess, need a lawn. Their lawns are nice, but I think they should definitely be interspersed with more naturalized habitats. I know a lot of us have HOAs, and that's difficult, right? So some interplanting or planting in your backyard where the HOA is not as onerous, behind trees, in little islands within your property, even in containers. Okay. So I am a big advocate of container gardening, and the more Gwinnett grows, a lot of these are condos and high-rise condos, and you may not have anything but a balcony. And that's okay. So you can grow all sorts of stuff in buckets. You can grow them in pots. I mean, container gardening is very easy and you can totally do that, and the pollinators will find it. You just have to have it year after year because they do have a memory. So you also want to have, in addition to those nectar producing plants and pollen producing plants, have a few host plants. So host plants are what butterflies use. They lay their eggs on those plants. They are very host specific to that particular species of butterfly. And they'll lay their eggs there, and those eggs will hatch, and their caterpillars will eat those host plants. And again, they're very specific. So most people know about the monarch butterfly and milkweed. That's probably the most famous, but we have swallowtails and Gulf fritillaries and skippers, and they all have host plants as well. So it makes sense to go out and figure out what those butterflies need with respect to their host plant. Put that in your yard, even if it's only a couple of those plants. An easy one, if you have a trellis, you can put a passion flower vine on that. That is the host plant for Gulf fritillaries. You also would want to think about planting for a succession of bloom so that you always have something blooming, and you can see this a bloom period for field flowers between spring until frost, because that's going to provide plentiful nectar and pollen for all of the bugs that need that. Get to know the beekeepers in your area. So we get calls and say, oh, we must have a wild hive someplace. I have bees, honeybees that are on, my flowers and stuff like that. And now we've got what's called the varroa mite, and it's very difficult to have bees in a non-monitored hive area. So to have a wild hive somewhere up in a tree or something like that, You might see that, that might happen, but generally they don't last. And that's because of the varroa mite. The varroa mite, and there's wax moths, and there's other things that can be detrimental to honeybee populations. They are not native to the North American continent. They actually have been brought over from Europe. You have European honeybees and you have Italian honeybees. Those are the two types that you generally will see most often here. All sorts of interesting things about them. I'm not going to go into it too deeply, but if you do know of or have neighbors that have bees, introduce yourself. So bees can be kind of annoying sometimes if you have a spa, hot tub, or you have a pool, but there are ways to deal with that. So before you get too angry, if that's you, give us a call. We can give you all sorts of ideas on how to mitigate that so it's not a problem. Provide nesting sites for bees. So there is a publication, you can see that right here, creating pollinator nesting boxes. The picture on the top is actually from that publication, but these are for solitary bees. So you'll have leaf cutters, you may have mason bees, but they don't nest in the ground. They nest in hollow tubes. So that's kind of what you're providing here. You're providing hollow tubes, and they're always a specific width. A lot of times you can use paper drinking straws. You can get bamboo and cut it. It's hollow. You always have to have a back on it. So you can see there's a close up of what that looks like down below. Make sure you're cutting the correct diameter. I got bamboo in my backyard. My neighbors planted it. You are welcome to come get as much as you would like. But, a quarter to a half inch holes, and they've got to be at least 3 inches deep. So sometimes people say, oh, they must be 6 inches deep. No, the bugs don't care. It's great if they are, but they will still go and lay their eggs in there. All they want is a place to put their babies. That's all. So as I mentioned, you got to have a back on the end of it. It can't be open-ended. You can do the cardboard. Sometimes we do with kids, we'll do the crafts where we take craft paper and roll it up in those particular sizes. But if you have a pasture and you've got a lot of hollow stemmed weeds out there, you can collect those. Those work too. I mean, there's lots of things that you can do. So you can tell if they're occupied pretty easily. You'll be able to see either it's going to be brown. So if you have mason bees or leaf cutters, you might have green. They'll cut the leaves up and then kind of paste them and close them shut. You can see down in the bottom right, one is actually broken through. You can actually get these online. So some folks will sell the cells like this, and you can put them together and have pollinators at your house. So the other thing, educating gardeners about insect behavior. So learn about how these little insects, the solitary bees specifically, figure out where do they nest? What do they feed on? Sometimes you call them sweat bees. A lot of them are the very small bees. We'll go over that. But yeah, they're different from the honeybees. They don't live that way. They're very solitary. They're not colonial like honeybees. So just be very mindful of that. You don't have to cut the grass if you see their little tunnels out there. Just leave them be. Pun intended. All right, I mentioned integrated pest management, or IPM. So this is biological, cultural, mechanical, physical, and chemical controls. This is how we approach pest management in general, how we have all of these 5 different methods that we put together into a toolbox. And each person might use bits and pieces of each of them. And it really depends on what you're trying to treat. But first and foremost, when we get a phone call at our office and someone says there's something eating fill in the blank, or I have brown spots on the leaves of my whatever. Well, they may think they know what it is, but they don't really know. So we really want to ID things, insects that might be eating stuff, or in your yard or whatever. We want to ID them. Each insect feeds in a specific way. So we can usually tell by the damage. And if you actually find the insect, that helps, right? We generally know what the life cycles are, when they're going to be a problem. I mean, you can chart that. and then there are preferable ways of controlling them. Sometimes, the conditions are just right in the environment and it's a problem, and you get a big boom in population. That happened, um, I guess it was probably in 2022, 20, maybe 23. We had leaf miners in white oaks, and people thought that it was a fungal issue. It wasn't a fungal issue. It was the life cycle of a particular very small fly, and they were in the leaf miner stage. And they just, for whatever reason, it was a bumper crop. But using good cultural practices by planting disease-resistant cultivars, being smart about it. Keep your soil healthy. Check your pH. Do that soil test. Using fertilizer when necessary and watering appropriately. Don't just sprinkle it overhead. Water down at ground level where it's actually going to be useful to the plant. Correctly applying pesticides. So we'll go over the pyramid in a second. Apply them correctly. You can use them, but if you're doing it at the wrong life stage or you're doing it at the wrong time of day, you're wasting it and you're actually making it worse for the environment. So consider the entire ecosystem. That's basically what I'm suggesting to you. Figure it out. And we at Extension are your partners in that. We can help you. So this is the IPM pyramid, and this is a very pictorial way of looking at that. So you can look at the bottom, and it goes from the least invasive and damaging up the pyramid to the very tippy top, which is pesticides. Right? So bottom is cultural. That's site selection, plant selection, sanitation, cleaning up dead stuff, crop rotation, things like that. Physical and mechanical, that's going to be like insect traps, pheromone traps, barriers to keep animals out of places, fences, weeding and getting rid of the seed heads, the seed beds, mulching to cover up the soil, and or keep moisture in, tilling things under, pruning stuff, flaming to kill weeds. None of them have a residual effect, right? But they are a little bit more than what cultural would be. Biological, so that's going to be predatory insects, parasitic insects, nematodes, and that goes for other pest species as well. So, um, you know, uh, parasitic wasps and tomato hornworms. That's a very good one. So if you see a tomato hornworm and it's got a bunch of white little cocoony looking things on it, leave it alone because those are parasitic wasps and they will hatch. They will go burrow down into that caterpillar and they will eat it from the inside out and kill it. So that's the next generation. You don't want to kill them. So leave it be and let it do its thing. Next up, chemical. You've got the chemical part of the IPM pyramid, and that's horticultural soap, oils, insecticidal soap, horticultural oil, neem oil. You might use baking soda to change the pH. You might have repellents, insect growth regulators, microbials. You might have BT, Bacillus thuringiensis, which is used for mosquito dunks. That's probably the most famous type. And then you have up at the very tippy top, you have chemical or organic, synthetic or organic pesticides. And yes, we do put some of the organics up there because they actually can be dangerous. So you basically move from the bottom to the top for risk. Somewhere in there, you probably have a threshold of what you'll tolerate, and usually you start stepping it up after you hit that threshold. Okay. So, what's your role as a homeowner and landowner in IPM? Well, we want to try to avoid or limit our applications of systemic insecticides to soil around flowers, trees, shrubs, that kind of thing. Anything that's going to attract bees or any other type of pollinator because that can kill them. There are several. Spinosad is one. It's actually very detrimental to pollinators and it's an organic. So you need to understand what you can use, when you can use it, and what you can use it on so that you don't hurt the pollinator population. So, for instance, if you have kind of a little bit of a lax lawn care situation going on, and in the winter, maybe you've got Zoysia or Bermuda, and you start noticing those little purple flowers popping up, henbit, leave them alone or hand pull them because that is one of the very first flowers that bees will get to in the spring. So don't spray it. Go ahead and either just cut it down with your lawnmower, run that over the top, or hand pull it. So that is less detrimental to pollinators than going out and trying to spray. Read and follow all the recommendations, precautionary statements, your labels, all of that stuff. And you're going to look for this protection of pollinators box to be educated. So the label's the law. More is not better. So if you are going to put down some type of a pesticide, you need to read the label most definitely. I had a guy this morning that called me, had been spraying a particular type of invasive that we have here. I'm going to leave some details out. And he had a he was using a pesticide that was licensed for only professional use. Now we can get that in the aftermarket, but we don't advise for that. And that the reason is because he was saying I used this and it used to work great and it's not working anymore. And I said, well, how long have you been using it? And he said, about 8 years. And I said, well, it looks like if you haven't rotated your pesticide, I said, it looks like you probably have developed a resistance. So there's a lot of things that you need to know, and we want to really try to use those more dangerous pesticides, leave those to the professionals. Consider making a pollinator health kind of a family thing. Some people really like posting signage and you can do all sorts of stuff to get these signs. I mean, there's usually a checklist. If you're really into that kind of thing, you probably already have a yard that qualifies. So here's just a selection of different programs that you can get certified in the Georgia Green Landscape. I do teach some of those. You can go on that website, and I guarantee you can probably qualify pretty easily if you're watching me now, because most of us care enough. But you can get that really nice little sign there, and it's very colorful, and it shows that you do care about pollinators. All right, so let's jump in on the Great Southeast Pollinator Census. So this year, it's going to be the 21st and the 22nd, a Friday and a Saturday. It's always the third Friday, Saturday of August, every single time, every single year. And we have Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Alabama, Mississippi, and Florida all participating with their extension services. So all the good things, and we keep adding more and more states every year. So this is a wonderful thing. Anybody can participate. If you can do it at home as a family, you can do it with a school group. We have lots of schools. We have opportunities for that. You can do it in a scouting group, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts. You can do it with garden clubs, church groups, just as an individual, in your pot, out on your deck. You don't have to be an entomologist. We have made it as simple as we possibly can. We have free ID sheets, so you can always reach out to me. I'm happy to share that. You can come to some of our public events, and I'll share those later. Lots of opportunities. So, the goals, we want to create and add sustainable pollinator habitat across Georgia. It's not just Georgia now, though. All of those states, that is a goal for all of those states, is to increase the number of pollinator gardens and pollinator habitat. We also want you guys to become smarter about insects. That's why I gave you a little bit of the history. We want you to do better about how to ID them. We want you to know a little bit more about them and feel more familiar. We also want that data, because data is a gold mine, and that's how we know, are we doing good things? Are we doing bad things? Are the populations stable? Are they increasing? Are they crashing? Sometimes we can see trends, and we can intervene if we need to. So data is always a good thing in science. All right, some statistics, because probably there's a lot of you out there that want to know, because we've been around doing this for about 6 years, what good stuff has come out of it. So, pollinator gardens, these are small gardens. Now, this again is older data, but you can see based on the first so many years of this, no, I guess not 2019. So it's been, yeah, like 7 years. So you can see here, based on the legend, that we have these are how many new gardens we got each year because of the pollinator census, right? We kept track of that when you get one of these little data sheets that you would get if you comes to one of our events. You put down where the garden is, what it is, your pollinating plant, all of that thing, all of that stuff. So that's how they keep track of and know what pollinators are on what plant. And you can see each year we've added that many. Gwinnett County has been fantastic about that. So we've tried very hard to get the word out there, both for schools and in the public. And so we have now kind of just an organic growth. So it's a good thing. Here we have up to a quarter to up to an acre. So that's a little bit more land. But again, Gwinnett County is like up in the top, right? We got a buy-in from the county of the Gwinnett County. So it is, they were participating and they were doing stuff, but we had schools too. So lots of good growth here. And here's over an acre. Uh, so sometimes we would expect to see it slow down in areas of high adoption. I'm looking forward to hopefully getting some additional data now. I know they've been busy trying to get all the different extension agencies to contribute and getting this to sign up, but hopefully we'll see some new data coming out this year or next. And here's the economic value. So the economic value 2019 to 2023 in pollinating gardens. So we have what we call farm gate in each of our counties with extension. And that gives us an estimation of how much money is being produced in that particular county. So every single county has to report that. And here in 2021, you can see for pollinators, the economic value of pollination is right at about 600 or $635 million. That's where that number came from. So these are hard statistics and they are collected by the university. So here's some 2025 numbers. These are just kind of interesting factoids. You can see here that, and this is all the states. So you can see Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, and Florida contributed to this. There were 27,000 counts submitted, and that's going up every year. We had 1,132 new pollinator gardens created amongst all these states. We had 594 educators using the pollinator census in their curriculum, which is pretty cool. And we definitely encourage that. If you are a teacher and you are interested in this, you'll see the website as we get through it, but there are lots and lots of materials there for you to use in your STEM activities. And this one was just kind of interesting. We had 59 participants who counted on oregano plants that were then shared over in the UK, in the EU. So kind of interesting. So here's 7 years of Great Southeast Pollinator Census data. A lot of stuff going on here. This was just a very good pictorial way to show all the insects, the total number of counters, and you can see that total has gone up, the states that are participating and when they came in, and then the number of pollinator gardens. So again, a lot going on here, but it's very heavy in information and it's very valuable information. So you can see. And again, here's a good way to see the number of insects. So this is better pictorially. So you can see, we see a lot of butterflies. They're usually like 26% of the sample. And you can see over in the legend, the N is the population. That's the number of counts that we had for or counted of that particular insect. So you can see the butterflies make up the vast, about 26 or a quarter of what we're counting. And then we have bumblebees. We have others, which would be like katydids and praying mantises and wheel bugs and that kind of thing. Stuff that's not really a pollinator but hangs around them. And then we have small bees that'd be like your sweat bees, wasps, flies, honeybees, carpenter bees, all that. But you can see the total number, and that's 7 years of counting. All right, so let's talk about plants that you'll see in August, which is obviously coming up here pretty quick. Saturday, August 1st. So here's some plants in our area. This is going to be for North Georgia around the Atlanta metro area, although we can extrapolate that and pretty much anywhere in Georgia will do well with these particular plants. These are what we could expect to be blooming in August, in and around that time when we're having the pollinator census. So if you have some of these in your garden, or know somebody that has these in their garden, then you're set. You don't have to worry about it. If you're sitting there going, man, I don't have these. Oh, I really wish I did. You are in luck that you've got a nice list here and you can plan really well for next year. So you can make sure that you have all of these blooming in your garden for next time. Okay, so this is what we're going to do. So we're going to take a little bit of a dive into the pollinator census and what the categories are made up of. So these are the categories that you're going to count. Carpenter bees, and we'll talk about how to identify them. Bumblebees, honeybees, small bees, like sweat bees, wasps, flies, butterflies and moths, and other insects. So we're going to, like I said, take a deep dive. Okay. So carpenter bees, that's going to be your first category. So they're about 3/4 of an inch. They're good size. We see them most often in the springtime when they're out around, flying around our wood on our soffits and our fascia and our decks, and we get really angry because they burrow into our wood and we find a pile of sawdust. Well, that's the female. She's basically burrowing into that wood because she's going to lay her eggs. The males will have a dot here, and the females don't. But the females are going to burrow in, hence the name carpenter bee. They're going to burrow into any type of untreated and treated, sometimes wood, because they want to have a gallery that's probably about this long, and they'll lay their eggs, section it off, lay another egg, section it off, so on and so forth. And then that's what they do. And, they do a lot of destruction, not going to lie. They do. But they are pollinators also. So there's kind of a trade-off there. But the easy way to identify them is their rear end or their abdomen, if you want to call it that. What you're seeing there is that bees kind of diving in like that. That rear end does not have any hair on it. It's completely hairless. It's very shiny. So that's how you're gonna tell it apart from a bumblebee, because those are the ones that are about the same size and sometimes get mixed up with how they look. So they're gonna have hair on their head and their thorax, which is the middle part of their body, but they're not gonna have any hair on that rear end. So just kind of keep an eye on that. Next up is bumblebees. They're about the same size. Like I said, it can be hard to tell the difference, right? If they're flying around, you need them to kind of settle down someplace because, as I mentioned, they are pollinators. They will fly onto plants to pollinate them. They're just laying their eggs on your soffits and your fascia up at your roof line or your deck. They're trying to do their babies. Here, they're feeding. So with bumblebees, you can see the rear end down below there. They've got a hairy abdomen with stripes on them. I'll flip back here. The carpenter bee is shiny and smooth. There's nothing there, right? And the bumblebee has hair. So they're also going to have, and we'll talk about a few other things. They're going to have a very tiny head and a very big abdomen. So the other way you can tell a bumblebee is they have this tiny little pollen basket or this little organ called a corbicula. And so as they're out there flitting from flower to flower and feeding, that corbicula, you can see that red arrow pointing at it, that is going to be full of pollen. Pollen will kind of just collect around that. Carpenter bees don't have that. So the shiny hiney, we'll get to that in a second. So you have the shiny, hairless abdomen on the carpenter bee, and you have a fuzzy abdomen on the bumblebee. You also have the corbicula or the pollen basket on the bumblebee. Here's some side by side so you can see. So the abdomen on the carpenter bee is a little bit longer. It's only going to have hair on its head and the thorax or the chest part, if you will, whereas the bumblebee has it on the entire body, has hair. And this is where we call it the fuzzy bum. A bumblebee has a fuzzy bum, and the carpenter bee has a shiny hiney. So this works really well for kids. They get a good laugh out of it, but it's pretty accurate. So you can see the carpenter bee's on the left and the bumblebee is on the right. Honeybees. So we all love honeybees. They do a fantastic job of pollinating. These guys are smaller in body size. They're not as big and robust, but they are still fairly long, about 3/4 of an inch. Black or brown stripes on the body, and the golden brown hairs are going to cover the abdomen. So their abdomen is not black. It's kind of got the yellow and the black stripes. So, and they have rather large eyes. Okay. Here is a bumblebee and a honeybee next to each other, so you can see the size difference. Lengthwise, they can be almost the same length, but size-wise, the bumblebee is considerably larger typically. There are some smaller bumblebees, but we don't have a lot of those around here. We're going to have the larger ones. So, they tend to be more distinguishable by that. And you can see the little corbicula there on the bumblebee on the left. All right, we have small bees. That's the next category. Here you have a little sweat bee, a green sweat bee. And these are going to be some of your singular or your individual bees. So leaf cutter bees, if you have a bee house, with the little reeds, you may see the leaf cutter bees will use that. They cut the leaf matter up and then they lay their egg and then they cap it with that. The sweat bees, and there's others, mason bees, that kind of thing. Anyway, small bees, they're going to be smaller than a honeybee, right? So the honeybee was about 3/4 of an inch. These are about 1/4 of an inch, very small. So a lot of them have that metallic shine. They may be like a bronze metallic. You may get green metallic. You can get blue metallic. They're very pretty. They're from the family Helictidae, and they're just really on a beautiful, like a white, if you have a yarrow or Queen Anne's lace or something, and you get some of these guys on there, it's great for photography. And here's some more examples. You've got the mining bee, you've got a furrow bee, you've got a leaf colored bee. That's what these guys look like. They're all on mountain mint. So if you have mountain mint in your yard, it's not like the typical mint that you would put in your tea. It is in the mint family. It's not nearly as invasive as regular mint, and pollinators love it. So mountain mint, there are different types of mountain mint. This is a great pollinating plant. Next up, we have flies. So we have the long-legged fly, we have the bottle fly, crane fly, and the tachinid fly. So yes, flies are pollinators. Okay. Remember, there's a difference between laying eggs and that life stage and eating. Okay, so a lot of times we want to think of it like the bottle fly, especially. It's a garbage fly. It's still a pollinator. And you will see them land on flowers, and yeah, they're still pollinators. They eat other stuff, but they do still eat pollen, nectar. So you have this interesting, this is just a side note, family of Syrphidae. These are bee mimics. So how do you tell a bee and a fly apart? We'll talk about that. Um, it looks like a bee. It is using that to stay safe so birds don't eat it. Look at its abdomen, it's striped, right? But it is a fly because of the number of wings that it has. Bees will actually have 4, flies 2. But it's using something called Batesian mimicry. It has very close little small antennae. The eyes are really close together. Yeah, they are trying to look like a bee so that predators will leave it alone. Very smart. Nature is very smart. So here's the different types of mimicry of Batesian mimicry and Mullerian mimics. Batesian is where you have a harmless insect like that little fly that I just showed you, imitating a harmful insect so that birds will leave it alone or other predators. The honest signal is in the middle. That's a true to life, in this case, a bee or a yellow jacket, will sting you, right? That's what it's trying to mimic. It's trying to say, hey, I can sting you. It won't, but birds can't tell because, they're not that intelligent. So, and then you have the Mullerian mimics. That's going to be multiple harmful or distasteful type species that have evolved to share the same warning sign. So here you have a honeybee, and it looks like a wasp or a yellow jacket. They all look alike, don't they? They all have that striped abdomen. It kind of shouts, hey, don't get near me because I can sting you, right? So that's Mullerian. Okay, bee or fly. We talked about that. So here's a series of different types of insects. I'm just going to go through it for, just so we can speed along here. You have a bee fly up in the top left. You have a hover fly over here in the top right, and then you have a drone fly in the bottom left. And they all have some kind of a striped abdomen, which mimics the Batesian mimicry, mimics one of the more harmful species. Pretty smart. Okay, so moving on, wasps. We have wasps. They're all going to be about an average of 3/4 of an inch. Sometimes they're bigger, but you have potter wasps, paper wasps, and there are others. These are generally going to be hairless, and they have very narrow waists. That's how you tell a wasp from most everything else. And then you have, is it a bee or is it a wasp? So again, this is one I'm not going to go too deep into because we do need to talk about how to do the pollinator census. But this wild pollinator count with the QR code, that's where you can go check out this particular, I kind of condensed it all right here. I do record this. This will go up on our Metro Master Gardener YouTube channel, and you can, get all these QR codes there. Also, if you're interested, I am happy to share a copy of my slide deck. So when we get to the very end, you'll see my email address. Just get my email address and send me an email and say, hey, Lisa, can I have your slide deck for the pollinator census presentation? Not a problem. Okay, next up, we've got butterflies. And so it's going to be butterflies and moths. So here's some butterflies. You might see the gray hair streak, the Gulf fritillary, the monarch, and then moths. Moths tend to be more active at night, but you might see these during the day. That's the webworm moth. We have the scape moth. Looks a little bit like a cousin of the firefly. And then we have the sphinx or the hawk moth. A lot of times people will call them hummingbird moths. Some of those come from those tomato hornworms. And we do have different species that hang out on gardenias and hydrangeas and others, but that's what those are. Now you know. And then we have the very last category, the others. And this is pretty much everything else that you might see out there. So you've got a praying mantis, you've got the lady beetle, the katydids, wheel bugs. You might see some grasshoppers. There's all sorts of stuff out there. Those all go into the other category. They're not pollinators. They may be predators. They're not pollinators, but we still count them. All right, let's do some quiz stuff here. So you're going to test yourself. So give it a second. You look at that and you go, I know what that is. That is a honeybee. Right. Because it's got the striped black and yellow abdomen. It's kind of fuzzy. It's got very large eyes. It's got the four wings. You can't really see it well here, but that's a honeybee. All right. Next up, it's green. It's very small. It's a small bee. It's a green sweat bee. As I mentioned, a lot of the metallic bees are going to fall in that small bee category. So there you go. All right. It's bigger. It's got a shiny hind end. It is a carpenter bee. Great. Yep. Okay. I'm sure we probably all we've seen these at our picnics. Um, so we probably all know what this is. It's a fly. It's a green bottle fly. And they have the two wings that they fold back like that. The difference in those the fly mimics, they tend to hold their wings out a little further, much more like bees or wasps do. Okay, what is this? It is an other, and it's a leaf-footed bug. We hate these in the garden. They love to get on our tomatoes. Their piercing, sucking mouth parts will uh, suck the juices out of our tomatoes, and they give it an off taste. They're in the stink bug family. So, as a bit of trivia, you can plant sunflowers away from your tomatoes, and they're attracted to the sunflowers. And that's a good way to both get them away from your tomato plants, and if you get the mama sunflowers, to have seeds for the birds. Next up, what about this guy? I don't know, he's kind of yellow and black, and he's got a fuzzy rear end. Good size. Bumblebee. That's right. Next up, looks like we've got some goldenrod here, and we've got a bug with a very skinny waist. I wonder what that would be. You're right, it's a wasp. We can tell pretty easily with those. Very long, thin wings and a very narrow waist. All right, this one might be a little bit tougher. So it has the yellow and black stripes. Its antennae are very tiny and they're in the middle, and they only have two wings. It's a hoverfly. Yeah, so it's using that Batesian mimicry to look like an insect that stings. But and as I mentioned, it holds its wings away from its body, but it's using its markings to scare off predators. Okay, what about this guy? It's a lacewing. So these aren't really pollinators, but we count them anyway. So lacewings fall under the insect. How'd you do? Hopefully you got them all, but if you didn't, that's okay, because we have materials that have all of those on there so that you can know with authority what you're looking at. So these are our public events that we'll be having. We've got Friday, August 21st. This does not include school events, really. These are all public events that anybody can go to if you would like to. We encourage you to have your own, but these are the public ones. So we're going to have over in Grayson, in Gwinnett County, we'll have at the Southeast Co-op, we'll have one in their garden there. At Gwinnett Tech in off of Sugarloaf, we'll have one over by the greenhouse there. The brand new Preston Williams Gateway Park at the Gas South District. I'll be at that one. I'll try to make an appearance at most of these, but we'll have master gardeners at others. And then Saturday, we've got Vines Park, in the actual park, not the community garden. And then at Lilburn Community Garden, we'll have one there. And then at Pour Brewing Company in Lawrenceville, that one's always very popular. We have lots of people as long as the weather holds off. We have lots of people that attend that one. They have a wonderful beer garden. And then we have this pollinator identification guide. So if you're not really certain about it, that's okay. We've got this great ID guide that the county has come up with for us. And if you would like a copy of it for your own event or to use at home, again, just send me an email and I'm happy to share that. That's what that is for. And, yeah. So, how do you actually do the pollinator census? It's very, very simple. A lot of you probably have already done it, but this is what you do. Very simple. So, one, you're going to pick a blooming pollinator plant with a lot of insect activity. So, scope it out now, figure out where you're going to do it so that when August 21st rolls around, you know where you're going. So, this happens to be a coneflower, and coneflowers are a favorite of butterflies. So, pick something out. Next up, you're going to get comfortable. You're going to get a chair. You're going to sit on a bucket. You're going to do something that is comfortable for you. And you're going to set an alarm on your phone or whatever, your watch, 15 minutes. You're going to count every single time a insect touches that plant. Not just to feed. So, like for instance, you might have a butterfly. It comes, it lands, it feeds for a second, and then it flies away. And then it comes back. You're going to count that again. So it's basically just tick marks. So we have, as I mentioned, cards with all of that. You can just put tick marks in the category where the that particular insect is, and then you just count them up at the end of that 15 minutes. And then when you're done, you're gonna you're also going to write down the temperature, the air temperature. You're going to write down, is it sunny? Is it partly cloudy? All those things. If you know that there's a beekeeper nearby, you can write that down. You write down the address so we know where the location is. There's a list of things, and you put down the time of day because all of these things will factor into the data collection and what they use. What I showed you was just raw data, but they do use a lot of that information for other statistical tests. Once you've done all of that, if you are not at one of our public events, then you can upload your observations to gsepc.org. The website has a place in there where you can put your observations, you can enter your observations, and that opens up on the 21st on that Friday. So if you did them in the morning, it's open. You can go in there and you can calculate. You can not calculate, but you can put all your observations in. If you do it at one of the public pollinator counts, volunteers usually will do that for you. And if you are in Gwinnett County and you are a master gardener, Kim Fritz, who is my counterpart, she handles the schools program in Gwinnett County. I handle most of the adult education and the Master Gardener program. She's got a lot of opportunities coming up if you are a Master Gardener in good standing, an active Master Gardener, and would like to volunteer in the schools at a pollinator count. She will have a list of those coming up. A lot of times they don't really reach out to her to let her know until a little closer to because school's just starting next week, so people are kind of busy. But if you are interested, you can reach out to Kim at that email address at the bottom of that slide there. It's pretty simple. I go and do one at Lovin Elementary. It's fun. Basically, the teachers will bring the kids out. You kind of go, they'll have a little notebook or something that they can keep track of all of that in there. Make sure that they get the right information on the type of plant, what date it is, what time it is, and the temperature and all of that. You make sure that the kids have all that. And then they usually assign you a plant. It may be sunflowers, it might be lantana, it could be zinnias, something like that. And then you just sit there and you make sure that the kids are watching and keeping track of stuff. And you can tell them, oh, that's a wasp or that's a butterfly, that kind of stuff. It's very simple. The kids love it. And it's fun. I really enjoy doing that. All right, so you can go to the website here. As I mentioned, there's also lesson plans. Maybe you're a homeschooler, there's stuff there. You can totally use that in your curriculum. If you are a teacher at a school and you haven't heard about this before and or you want more information, you can reach out to Becky Griffin, who is the coordinator for this particular program, at that email address there, or you can just go to the website. She has a bunch of ready-made stuff there that you can totally grab and use in your own curriculum. There is a Facebook page that you can go check out that she posts all sorts of information on, and there will be information about events outside of the metro area. So if you have an event, maybe at your church, or if you're in a different part of Georgia or one of the other states, you can totally reach out and have that uploaded onto that Facebook page. So lots of good stuff there. So as I mentioned, I am perfectly happy to share my slide deck. It's got a couple QR codes in there. So if you would like, you can grab my email address there and you can reach out to me and I will share that. And let me see here. Yeah, so please just email me. Don't put it in the chat. I do go there, but I do much better if you email me and then I can directly attach it to you. So I see that there's a couple email addresses in there. If you want this information, please just email me at this particular email address, lisa.klein@gwinnettcounty.com. Thank you. I appreciate that. Let's see. Can I use pics of some of your slides? We have a new McIntosh County Master Gardeners page. email me and ask me a little bit more about that. Okay. Um, I'm not quite sure exactly what you're wanting. So um, I want to get a better idea of that. Probably. What was the YouTube channel? Ah, yes, here we go. So it's Metro. It's the Metro Master Gardener YouTube channel. So I post it's not on here. I apologize for that. I probably should have thought to put that on there. I do that with all of the webinars that I typically teach. There's a QR code on the back of it, backslide. So it's Metro Master Gardener, and that's where everything that gets recorded, which I am recording this. There's previous years recordings also there. Everything gets deposited there. So you can go and if you're a master gardener and you're looking for CE, continuing education stuff, you can find that there as well. And there's lots and lots and lots of videos that you can watch until you get bored and fall asleep. Let's see. We will be having our school event at Mason. Yay! Yes. Um, our dragonflies pollinators. So yes and no. Um, so dragonflies are they're an aquatic invertebrate in their juvenile stage. They live in the water and then they will molt and fly away and they will breed and then they will lay their eggs back in the water. And there are some species that oh, thank you, Chris, for putting the Metro Master Gardener YouTube channel up there. There are some species that don't feed at all, right? They do everything when they're juveniles, and then they're just out there having fun as adults and they don't live very long. Some do, um, but it really depends a lot on the species and where they're located. Here we have a lot, we have some that live in ponds, we have some that live in rivers and streams. Um, all over. But same thing with stone flies, black flies. There's a lot of um, invertebrates, a lot of the benthic macroinvertebrates. They have their juvenile stage in the water. Yeah, I should probably do a webinar on that. That would be kind of interesting because I think sometimes people don't fully understand that what you do in the water can fully affect what bugs you see on the land. So that's actually there's my rabbit hole. There's another rabbit hole I like to go down. Yes. Yes, thank you. They are predators, but there are also some that are just simply pollinators, and there are some that eat nothing at all. Um, are there any other questions about the pollinator census and any events that we're having, or any questions about um, anything at all to do with the pollinator census? No? Okay. Um, Well, great. I appreciate you all tuning in. I hope that you know how easy it is. It is so easy. It's a great way to be a citizen scientist. Great great thing to do with kids, great thing to do with adults and garden clubs and all of that. And all that data is so valuable. It is so valuable and so necessary, and it's a fun way to get it. So I hope you all will be planning where you're going to go and what you're going to do. And you don't have to do just one; you can do a bunch. In fact, I really suggest picking out maybe 3 or 4 different plants, completely different plants. Watch them and see what kind of bugs you see. If you see like bees on one and butterflies, do one there. Maybe you have that mountain mint and you might see some wasps and some flies on that one. Do one there. Just, shake it up a little bit because then you hit a bunch of different categories of insects, and that's really great because that, again, translates back to good statistics so that we can use that for population monitoring. So, all right. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate everybody showing up, and I'm going to go ahead and stop this. But everybody have a good evening and take care. And we'll see you later.